Thank you, Tom. I'm Jay Hakes, and I'm the director of the Jimmy Carter Presidential Library in Atlanta. And while we're paying debts to other presidents, Jimmy Carter, I think, in part was president because his school teacher visited Eleanor Roosevelt at the White House in 1935. And to have a teacher in a little town like Plains who'd been to the White House, that was really something. But I'd like to turn to the first slide here at a moment in the Carter presidency that's pretty well known. This is when the leaders of Egypt and Israel got together to try to negotiate a peace treaty at Camp David. They ended up staying for 13 days. It was a very protracted negotiation, and this was clearly at the beginning of the process when Begin and Sadat were still talking to each other. After the first few days, they refused to talk to each other, so President Carter would have to walk back and forth between the various cabins to try to find language that the two could accept. And when it was finally over, they did reach a settlement. The treaty wasn't actually signed till March of 1979. But after that, Begin and Sadat both got the Nobel Peace Prize. President Carter did not, as the committee said later, because he had never been officially notified or nominated. He was not actually eligible to be selected at the same time that Begin and Sadat were. Well, as the years went by, added to the Camp David negotiations was the work of the Carter Center around the world, and in 2002 the Nobel Peace Prize Committee picked President Carter for the Nobel Peace Prize, which is the next item, and it was for the Camp David negotiations and for the work of the Carter Center. You can see here how we've displayed it at the library. We incidentally had it up on display within 14 days of when it was awarded. And you see next to it is a bright piece of art in the diploma, and that's something that each winner gets as an original piece of art in the diploma. They also get $1 million in prize money, which President Carter gave away. And then they get 3 copies of the medal, which a lot of people don't know. And because they get 3, we are actually one of the few places in the world where we have 2 of the 3 in the same location, so you can see the front and the back at the same time. I had suggested to President Carter when we only had one that we might put it on a rotating platform with a little motor in it, and he thought that was such a terrible idea that he gave us the second copy so we wouldn't have to do that. A couple other things that are unique about our situation: we are within 1.5 miles of Martin Luther King's Nobel Peace Prize. So if you want to be able to say that you actually walked between 2 different Nobel Peace Prizes, I think you pretty much have to come to Atlanta. It's actually marked out with historical markers. And then I'll mention just one other story that I tell when I give the tour of the museum and show people the medal. There are 2 other presidents who've won the Nobel Peace Prize. One of them is Woodrow Wilson, and the other one is Teddy Roosevelt. It is pretty well known that Woodrow Wilson spent a lot of his boyhood in Augusta, Georgia. His father was a Presbyterian minister there. And maybe a little bit less known, his first wife was born in Rome, Georgia, and is now buried in Rome, Georgia. Teddy Roosevelt also has Georgia connections. His mother, Mittie Bullock, was raised in Roswell, Georgia, which is now a suburb of Atlanta. So if you go to Roswell, there's Bullock Hall. That is the old Teddy Roosevelt's mother's residence. So if you stop and think about it, if you manage to get elected president and your mother's from Georgia, you have a 100% chance of winning the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, there's just a few other, if you really want to stretch it, Norman Borlaug, who has won the Nobel Peace Prize, is a consultant to the Carter Center. One of the former employees at the Carter Center from Kenya, her mother won the Nobel Peace Prize 3 years ago, Wangari Maathai, who is an environmental activist there. And then the other place in the world where 2 are quite close to each other is Bishop Tutu's and Nelson Mandela's. Bishop Tutu's, one of his daughters teaches at Emory University in Atlanta, comes to our place all the time. Nelson Mandela's granddaughter is a student at Clark University, comes all the time. So we figure we're tied to at least 7 or 8 Nobel Peace Prizes at the Carter Library. So we hope you all come visit. If you get in town, give me a buzz. I'll come down and try to tell you more.